So welcome back to this conversation, this Why Not Me conversation around human trafficking. When we talk about issues around the world, I think local context is very important. One of the first things when I got a chance to meet with Clarence and speak to him about some of the causes that he's fighting, I always mention, okay, anything you do in different countries, having a local expert not only strengthens the collaboration, but it adds a lot of nuance to the subject matter that may be the same, but also different at the same time. And when it comes to Gambia, that's why I'm really excited that we do have in the studio no other but Nancy Jallow. I'm not gonna do the introduction, but she has something in common with Clarence. Most people have known Nancy to be somebody who also fights for the voiceless through various issues, especially when it comes to the vulnerable communities in our society. So Nancy, welcome. And I'll allow you to introduce yourself, but also let us know who Nancy Jallow is.
Oh, wow, okay. Thank you so much for inviting me to this very important chat. My name is Nancy Jallow. I was born and raised in the Gambia. I moved to DC when I was 16 until I was 32. Whilst I was in DC, and people ask me what motivated me, I guess, to become an activist. I am known as an activist, but I'm way more than that. There are a lot of layers to me. My title is gender activist, human rights activist. Initially, I was a human rights fighter. Coming from Gambia and based in Washington, D.C. I think what really pushed me into activism was living in D.C., this like the capital of the U.S., where I was seeing so many senators, so many people in politics. I remember watching TV. I moved to D.C. in 2000. George Bush was president. I remember I'll watch TV and I'll hear these journalists criticize him, call him out on things that he was doing. And I'm like, I'm from Gambia. You don't dare call out Jammeh on what he was doing. And that was really when I started speaking out on social media. Facebook was new, but it was only open to college students. So there were a few of us online, and I think a few years later, they opened it. And then I started writing about little things that was really getting to me about the issues in Gambia. Slowly, I'm writing, there are people responding here and there, and eventually we came together and formed a group in DC called Duga DC. The role of Duga in terms of getting rid of Jammeh, this nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C., was very instrumental. We would go to New York, actually it starts this week, UN General Assembly when Jammeh is there, with our big signs demonstrating. We will strategize. Then we started building different groups in different states, D.C., Atlanta, Seattle. Then we went international. We have the European group. We have a WhatsApp. This is before WhatsApp. Mind you, was struggling because it was very expensive to call international. I think there was like an online thing where, kind of like Ruku. Yeah. Yes, this is I sound so old like talking about this. And, even back then, it wasn't really that organized. I think personally for me, what pushed me into fighting for victims was the day I remember I was done with college. I went to work. And I went online and I saw that 12 Gambians were assassinated by Jammeh. I remember walking into my yoga class. 2 minutes into it, I broke down. I cried the whole time and I didn't know why I was crying. But I knew that the injustice that were vetted on Gambians was unfair and there was nothing I could do. So myself and Fatou Sanyang, Empress Ja, and Fatou Jaumane, who were the first women who were part of the struggle. It was all men and we're the only 4 women. And we fought hard through it. And the rest is history. Jammeh left in 2016. I was a married woman in Abu Dhabi. I remember it had a different meaning. People were celebrating Jammeh is gone. For me, I remember holding my, Zaid was 3-month-old baby. I just broke down and I was crying because I knew all the hard work we put in it. I knew all the people we saved. Many people that Jammeh would really do so much to. We will buy plane tickets for. And I say this, I'm like, I lived in the US for so long and I didn't have much because all my money was put into this struggle. And there's no documentary about the struggle, really. I did it because I believed in justice. I believe that the life that I witnessed and lived in Washington, D.C., every Gambian deserves to live that freedom of expression and just being free, being yourself. So yeah, that was what got me into activism. And after Abu Dhabi, I moved back to Gambia with my son. And I wasn't really conscious of a lot of things around me. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think between 2016 and 2017, I was very lost. I went through a divorce. I had a little baby. I moved back to Gambia after, I don't know, so many years. All my friends were still in the US. All I had was an education, no job. They didn't know anybody. So I was like, okay, you need to come up with a plan. You have a baby, you're a single mother in Africa, you need to come up with a plan. So I didn't come up with a plan. One day I was introduced to a young lady who is a survivor of human trafficking. They're like, Nancy was in Washington. She is a human rights activist. I think that was the first time that somebody labeled me that name because I never labeled myself, and introduced me to this young girl who came to my house and shared her story with me. And I remember holding Zaid and crying with her when I heard her story. I'm like, what is human trafficking? This happened in Gambia? I thought human trafficking happened to people who live in Utah and Colorado. Like, that was my only exposure to it. Like, I know nothing about human trafficking. Then I went online, I started doing research. She's like, oh, there are 78 of us. And that's how I was introduced to trafficking in persons.
Interesting. First of all, thank you, because I think oftentimes we see the finished product.
Yes.
Some people in Gambia could see you and not know the Nancy Jallow in DC putting her own money, fighting when speaking up wasn't popular back then.
Nope.
So I appreciate you adding context, but most people still don't really understand what human trafficking is.
Okay.
So for a viewer who just hears about it and has a perception of people at the back of a van somewhere in the alleyway, what exactly is human trafficking, especially from a Gambian context? And it'll be interesting to lay that foundation because also Clarence's background has led him to see different variations of it. And I think there's a meeting point there. Mm-hmm. But before that, just educate people on what exactly is human trafficking, especially from an African context.
Okay. Human trafficking from an African context start with mostly in Africa, young girls are trafficked more than women. 80% of traffic victims are women. They are mostly trafficked to the Middle Eastern countries. Human trafficking is the buying and selling of human beings. That is a very, I know it sounds like we're dealing with commodities, but that's what it is. There are different elements to trafficking. There's the agent, there's the buyer, and there's the seller. The reason why the Middle East play a key role in trafficking, especially in Africa, is because they have something called, I think it's called the Khalifa system, slavery, owning of slaves. And it brings us back to Clarence was from the US where slavery was legal. And you would think that, you wouldn't think slavery and Gambia in this present day and age. As we're speaking today, if there's a flight, most likely there's a victim who's currently been trafficked. Human trafficking is still going on. It's a daily thing in Gambia. Every day there's a flight out of Gambia. A young Gambian girl is trafficked. Usually this is the African context. There's a market in the Middle East for domestic workers. So they have agents where they're like, okay, I'm gonna bring you a domestic help from Africa. So the one in the Middle East will pay them $5,000. That's the cost, $5,000. And that $5,000 is split. He'll send $1,000 to the one in Gambia who does the recruiting. They'll get the girl's passport. They'll go to different places, schools. They go to the most vulnerable members of our society. I think mostly, not even in the remote areas. They are centered around the Senegambia area, which is pretty much like, what would you equate Senegambia to?
It's like the Las Vegas Strip of Gambia.
Exactly. Yes, the Las Vegas Strip of Gambia. You're going after waitresses. You'll go to them. You know that they're making minimum wage. You offer them oh, guess what? I have a job for you in Lebanon. They'll pay you $1,000 a month. You're talking to someone who's never made more than $10 a month. That she's going to make $1,000 a month. That is the sell right there. Oh, really? How? Don't worry. I'm going to get you a passport. We'll buy your ticket. And then, you go to this family. You work as a domestic worker and they'll pay you $1,000. Simple. It's legal. Like, it doesn't even sound like anything. So these girls will agree. They'll go and get their passports. There's an agent. Once they get their passports, book their flights, they go to the airport. And this is where immigration and those of us who are trained in TIP, means trafficking in persons, this is where we come in. Number one, the girls, they don't know where they're going. They know they're going to Lebanon. They don't have a city. Everyone, when you're traveling, you'll know the hotel you're staying in. So these are the key factors that you look for when someone is considered a traffic victim. They don't know where they're going. They don't know who they're going to. They don't have names, nothing. They're just going to Lebanon to work for a lady named Zahra. That's it. That's all the information that they have. And before, they used to go through Dakar, but Dakar have tightened their borders and have fought human trafficking very, very hard. So now they're flying from Gambia to, really from Gambia to either all of these other African countries and connect straight to Lebanon. Lebanon have the most trafficked Gambian girls. It's the hot spot, really. And once they get there, they are placed in a room at the airport. So this is not just 1, 2, 3 people involved. There are people working at the airport who are involved. They are rushed into a room. Once you get into the room, there's the girls will tell you the story. It's about 4 by 4, and they'll put about 100 people there. Once it gets dark, depends on what time. Usually they do nighttime flights. Once it gets dark, a van will come in. All the girls will be loaded in the van, and they'll drive them off. Mind you, you are in a country where you've never been to. Like, you have no idea where you're going. Then they'll take them to like a facility, and they'll place them in different rooms. And this is the heartbreaking part. Those who have bought them will come and they'll, nah, she doesn't look like she's strong enough. I don't want this one. And they would pick them out. You select the one that you want and you take them home. And once they get there, you're like, they'll wake up in the morning. Oh, what am I doing? Okay, no, you have to clean this whole apartment building. When the month ends, you're thinking they're going to pay me $1,000. They don't give you anything. But as time goes by, the girls the first thing they'll take, I forgot, is they'll take your passport. They'll take your passport and they'll destroy it. The law in Lebanon is if you are caught without any documentation, it means you are illegally in the country. It's a 6-year jail time for you. So where are you going to run off to? So they are stuck in these situations that they are in because they have no documentations. So they're playing, it's either when you run away, you're playing hide and seek with law enforcement. So once they're there, sometimes some of them are lucky. They'll have a madam, that's what they call them, who is nice and kind and, might be a bit accommodating and would give them like $50. You don't have access to phones. You sleep in the most horrible situations. These girls experience every kind of, I have to keep reminding myself that I'm not I have to use these terms, gender-based violence. Anywhere from rape to organ harvesting to really anything that sometimes they will use these girls as prostitutes also to make extra money. So yes, this is kind of the route for Africans when it comes to the issue of human trafficking.
Yeah, I think it just it saddens me, and which kind of ties into is it us as human beings? Yeah. Because here we are over 500 years later, our ancestors, and I always emphasize that because we could have had common ancestors, Clarence and I, who landed in Charleston, South Carolina. And 400 years later, their descendants now are landing in Beirut, in Lebanon. Exactly. And the root cause of it is poverty, there's lack of infrastructure, there's a desperation. So, Clarence, how did you end up in human trafficking? How did your journey? We talked about your past a little bit, but I'm eager to see, based on what you've heard, how did you end up where you did start questioning, is it us as human beings when it comes to human trafficking?
Well, just listening to Nancy's story, I mean, that's definitely moving, and it goes in line with a lot of things that we're some of the things we're seeing in the U.S. But after playing ball, I ended up going to getting into human services, and after thinking like, how can I continue to help and be a person of impact, and I decided to go in, and I went and worked for the state, and just in the federal government to kind of get my foot in to see kind of how I can effect change and understand policies and how those things worked. And as I started doing that, those things and learning and understanding the environment, I started to then start my own private agency. And there was an environment where I can actually do that. And I ended up starting an agency before about 24 to 5 years ago called Greater Metrolina Mental Health. And so it eventually went into CTS Health, and then once I started this company, I wanted to go into the inner city and just kind of really just identify the needs and see how I can create the best and most impact. And so with this particular company I actually started, which is now CTS Health, and I've since then created a nonprofit, CTSCD, and then Why Not Me, the human trafficking. But my journey has been to go into the community and just identify the need, create the most impact, access to healthcare and that sort of thing. But the journey of the human trafficking piece came as I was developing CTS Health. We're in several states, and so I was actually going to on vacation out of the country, and as I entered in the airport, I ended up saw a sign that said, it was something to the fact about human trafficking, and there was a picture, and it may have been Colombia, I don't remember at this point. You had a little girl who had her hands behind her back, and this guy kind of guiding her, and you see a bunch of people that were walking, and they didn't see the girl, and I'm just like, man, that picture was worth 1,000 words to me, because you see this girl who doesn't have a voice, and these people were just kind of there hovering, and this guy's kind of pretending this is his relative or friend or whatever it was. And so at that point, I just wanted to go in, and I called my assistant, my executive assistant at the time, Allie Street, and I said, Allie, give me do some homework. Help me understand this. Is this a big deal? I mean, it's in an airport, or is this, what is it? And so she did her homework, and she was just in shock, And at that point, she kind of debriefed me on and let me know what it was all about. And so at that point, I called my executive team. I said, listen, we're doing this impact stuff, and we're going to stay on it, but we're going to shift gears a little bit. Mm-hmm. And they were kind of a little shocked. I was like, listen, we're going to do this human trafficking thing because it's the number one issue that we all share, that nobody wants to talk about or have no minimal ideas about, but we all can do mass, a lot of things if we are aware of what to look for and how to affect that change. And so as my team started doing homework, I just started learning so much things. It was just overwhelming with the stats and things like this, and a lot of things that Nancy has alluded to and have done. I mean, I commend her because she's in that fire. She's in it, and for me, we were just on the surface of just as much as Google will allow us to tell us, but she's actually in it, which is different, right? And so we started to write policy, and we started networking and connecting with a lot of different people who had their limited knowledge, and because they didn't have a lot of experience, and what at the time they were experts, but with minimum they had. So we started networking and things like that, and started creating our own policies and just try to get in a environment where we can kind of find out more. And so I kind of started really focusing. I kind of left the other programs because they were running and they were doing well with the therapy, and we moved into foster care and some other things, but I wanted to focus on this, and I also realized there was a global issue as we were going through it, so I started connecting with some of the partners that we are with now in Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, and also Puerto Rico as well, One of the things that we decided to do was to make the biggest impact was to create an event that we feel like that most countries, I guess, community individuals can identify with. So we connected with a lot of the CrossFit gyms. We felt like in the CrossFit environment, you have people that are in law enforcement, people that are executives, just average people that are in one place with a diverse background that if we communicate to, they can go out and have the most impact. Because at the time we were just kind of brainstorming who can we hit right now and who we know can be consistent, and in my mind it was thinking about athletes. A lot of athletes are very consistent and they're very passionate about what they do. So I was like, you know what? You can get demographics, male, female, young, old, and they all kind of center around the CrossFit environment. So connected with some of the those gyms in the different countries, and we said, hey, we're gonna put an event together where we, and where we can actually have a more conversation and also bring awareness and prevention to human trafficking, where we all across the globe can say one thing, and we can say this is what it looks like, and we can have it in a competitive environment. And so it's kind of how this has started, for us, and we're obviously continuing the journey and that sort of thing. Yeah.
And I think that's why I told you Gambia has to be added on to it the moment I found out, because I think, and it's very on brand. I think most people that have an affinity for sports, because I think there's a connection between what sports does in terms of bringing people together, what sports does in terms of building community, fostering good mental health, but capturing people's attention to let them know, hey, I know this is entertaining, but let's also look here.
Exactly.
And I think that's what's fascinating about it, especially if they're able to get a perspective. A vulnerable woman or child in Colombia, in Brazil, in Banjul, the human suffering is the same. They're poor,
100%.
They lack opportunity. And I think one of the things I give you credit for in terms of how you build the Why Not Me initiative was, okay, we build awareness, but what happens next in also creating opportunities for young girls and women, making sure communities know the signals like the advocacy, because now just from me hearing it, I've heard plenty of times where somebody tells me an incomplete story of them traveling, and maybe I could have been the one in the community to be like, hey, I think you should reconsider this decision as well too. So I think, and Nancy, you could jump in terms of the problem. There's one thing, you can't solve a problem without acknowledging that there is a problem, which I think has been very successful. But on the global end now, where do you see areas of collaboration in terms of minimizing the number of vulnerable people that actually consider a road filled with uncertainty because of desperation?
Let me come in?
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, thank you so much. I always say that the work that we do, activists, advocates, we cannot do it without people like you, who, like Ismaila have highlighted, are not only you could have simply enjoy your retirement, live your fancy life, and forget the human aspect of it. We all can do that. But it takes a very special human being to look beyond themselves and see a situation and want to change it. Like you said, even Banjul International Airport, there are signs there for human trafficking.
That's right.
It takes a very special person to notice these things. The subway in DC used to have this billboard of a little girl from Brazil, big eyes, hands it's dark. The background is dark. And that's, now I'm connecting it, and it's human trafficking.
Yeah.
So it's around us. It's all around us. And I think when you were talking, I want to say that human trafficking is the second largest illegal business in the world. It's billions of dollars. Drugs is number one. Human trafficking is number two. And I think the international aspect of it, because a girl in Gambia is trafficked all the way to the Middle East. A girl in Gambia is trafficked, and there are domestic trafficking. It does happen. We also have traffic between African countries. We have very young boys, little boys from Mali who are trafficked to Gambia. Senegal. The biggest trafficking victims Gambia have are actually from Senegal. the little boys who are attending the Arabic schools. They will run away because of all the abuses that they face in these Quranic schools. They would run away because the border, really Gambia and Senegal, you're walking, and they'll run away, come into the country, and just start wandering around. And under the Parliament Act, that is considered trafficking. The little kids, Ismaila, that you see carrying a tray selling water, under the law, is considered trafficking.
Tell us more about the Palomar Act for people that don't know.
Okay, so the Palomar Act in, I forgot the year, pretty much it's a United Nations Act where all the countries who are members of the UN sign that they are against the buying and selling of human beings. So this is under it's an act that the UN came up with. And any country that have signed the Palomar Act, it means there are consequences if your country is not doing enough to fight trafficking in persons. There are three tiers. Tier 1, that means the country is doing everything that they could possibly do, and they'll prosecute anybody, like our justice system is working and it's going. I think it's only the US that's there, because you guys have, like America have a justice system where the law is really there for everybody, give or take, depends on who's asking and who's talking. And then you have tier 2, which means the country is trying, but really they're not where they should be. Tier 3 means the country's not doing nothing. Like they're just chilling. Every day more people are being trafficked, things are getting out of control. In Gambia, the agency that is responsible for fighting human trafficking, it's called NATIP, National Agency Against Trafficking in Persons. It's been around for the past now 13 years.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And the US government, through the State Department, I've met with the head of the US State Department for Africa. We've met with so many people, the then US ambassador, I think she's from Atlanta.
Yes.
Yes.
I believe so. Yeah.
She did a lot of work. Before this current one, the guy who left, his expertise was actually human trafficking.
Yeah, Ambassador Pascal.
His expertise was human trafficking. Yeah. We've had many meetings, we've done a lot of work, a lot of advocacy. And I think for Gambia to kind of tie it to the US, like I mentioned before, US, I think there's a lot of interstate trafficking. And a very good way of, I guess, identifying a traffic victim, when you're in a plane and you're sitting next to a lady, and the lady is, I'm very observant of these things. You have to be observant of it. Usually when you see a girl who's like uneasy, there's a guy sitting, they usually have a jacket on their lap to kind of do gestures where you're not allowed to move when the girl gets up and go to the bathroom. Like all those are little things that, you can gauge, is this girl okay? Where are you going? I think there's a lot of sketch online about, trafficking and stuff like that. So the US is mostly between states, and most of these kids, and I think in America it's mostly kids, like you said, who are in the inner cities, runaway girls. And it's tied to trafficking, prostitution, they kind of go hand in hand. And Gambia, the biggest problem now we have with trafficking in persons is tied to irregular migration. These boys that are going through the back way, once they get to Lebanon, they realize that they actually traffic. As of 2024, IOM have estimated that 632,803 Africans have gone missing.
Wow.
Not accounted for. Nobody knows where they are. And they have all at some point experienced trafficking in persons, either at Lebanon or Libya, Tunis, and Algeria. Because these are like the hot spots. Tunis share a border with Europe. They're all trying to get to Europe. But there's one thing we call in trafficking called the push factor. What motivates these young, smart, capable people to leave everything they know behind to try to find for greener pastures? What motivates this young Gambian girl to say, I would like to make $1,000 a month? So that's the push factor. It's one thing and one thing only, poverty. That's the answer, poverty. We all want a better life for ourselves. Social media, I think, have changed the fabric of our lives. Ismaila would attest to this. Before, when you travel to America, you take a photo, you put it, you go to United States Postal Services, put it in the mail. By the time it gets here, most likely your outfit has expired, like something else, has come on. But now with social media, you'll just stand, next to a Rolls Royce, take a photo, put it on Facebook, and portray this image that the young Gambian girl looks at and be like, I want this life for myself. I want a better life for myself. And I think part of the reason personally for me why I tend to share my story, I'm like, listen, I used to live in the US. I moved to Gambia. And I am not I am in a much better place being in Gambia. I'm impacting more lives. I'm actually making more money living in Gambia than I did living in Washington, D.C. And I'm not taking myself as an example because I know I have all these opportunities. But when I came here, I didn't know anybody. I was a young Gambian girl. Nobody knows who I was, only those in the US and those who were in the struggle. So I keep encouraging, you can make it here. But at the same time, it's like, Nancy, you can make it here, but you have an education. These girls don't have education. They don't have opportunities. The university is producing mass graduates. Ismaila knows this. He hires a lot of people. There are no jobs. Unemployment is high. The Gambia census just came out. 40% of Gambians, I don't know if you've seen this. Did you see it?
Under 18.
Under 18.
Yeah.
40% of our population. Usually when developed countries talk about a young population, it means lucrative, successful countries. Yet for us, it means pure poverty. So there are a lot of areas of intervention, and human trafficking is tied to, the social issues, the push factors, it's a whole network of issues that are kind of intertwined. And I'm pretty sure the young American girl who is trafficked from, let's say, DC to Utah, might even come from a very wealthy family, well-to-do and all that. But maybe she's just a rebellious kid. I don't want to stay at home. You go out there and you fall into the wrong hands, and then you traffic to Utah. But obviously the US, they do a lot of work with human trafficking and have been fighting it continuously for decades now.
Yeah, and just kind of to wrap things up, because one of the things I think, vigilance and somebody paying attention, I think, is part of, and who is paying attention. I think there's two things, because why not me? Most people, if they do ask, why not me, should be also local context in terms of why can I not be the person who succeeds in Gambia, the person who earns honest living. But also, are the right people paying attention? Are people with influence, people with power?
That's right.
For most things to change, people like you who would have never been in Gambia having a conversation about human trafficking, where now people see that there's people that care beyond their own borders, because this issue really is borderless. So for Clarence, to wrap it up, maybe you could...
I don't want to cut you.
Yes.
Just use a word that is a human trafficking logo. Human trafficking is borderless.
Yeah, it is.
It's a logo that is used all around. Human trafficking is borderless. It knows no boundaries, no borders. No. So kudos to you on that one.
So for you, what gives you hope that there are solutions in place? Obviously, why not me? I think the CrossFit competition, I see it as a launch pad to have a global conversation, which is extremely successful. But I think this has been a cause of yours, and now you've done it in 3 continents. So for one, being the first competition that involves 3 continents around one issue is to be applauded. But also there's also steps. I know you have a vision for what good looks like and what role, why not me, what role Clarence, and then your entire ecosystem, because you have so many facets to you. Where do you see yourself? Where do you see why not me in terms of the impact they would want to make, but also what bridges, because I also see you as a bridge. A lot of things in Africa, it should involve bridges, people that exist in 2 different worlds. Like all 3 of us, honestly, are hyphens. We could build a bridge to people that didn't care about Africa. Now through you could care about Africa. We didn't have any exposure to South America, but through you now we do the same. So just to kind of hand the floor over to you for you to bring us home, just kind of see where you see everything that you've been dedicating a lot of time, energy, resource to going from here.
Thank you, man. And I appreciate, again, you giving me the opportunity to be here. And Nancy, thank you again as well. So at this point, after the event, the plan is to obviously continue to meet with stakeholders and meet with some of the local politicians and to bring the continued awareness. I think that is one of the biggest things that's lacking, education. A lot of people, they kind of may have heard the term, but they don't know why should they get involved, or just like myself. I mean, I saw that, but what triggered me to get involved or think that I can actually do something? The reality is that everybody can. And seeing it, as she mentioned, Nancy mentioned, that it's the number 2 illegal issue globally. And one of the more easier things for us to do is to not sit back and question, what our eyes are seeing. Be the observer. We all are seeing, and we all are affected because one of our relatives, one of our friends, one of our people that we know that knows someone has been affected. And at the end of the day, what I would like to do is to continue to bridge that gap between countries and add more continents, countries, and to do what her life work has been, to bring that awareness and then talk to individuals about what they can do. We're not asking people to be police officers or anything like that. We're saying, hey, these are the signs that you look for, but then it's okay to speak to someone, even anonymously, because we're seeing it and we just are not being aware to actually look for it. We're thinking that it's just on TV or it's the person here, but chances are the majority of us have seen something that give us pause and question, and it's nothing for us to just say, hey, let me just say something to this authority and let them figure it out, because this looks kind of weird or suspicious. So our next steps are to put things in place, continue to network with stakeholders, and to also, again, put more funding behind, ourselves, our funding behind, things that we feel that can affect this change and to reduce the issue, and again, continue to educate ourselves, and make those connections globally. And we're kind of starting this competition as a platform, a basis to continue to try to bring that awareness, out. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Clarence, and thank you, Nancy. And I'll just say to the viewers, hopefully everybody is a little bit more educated about the issue. But oftentimes when it comes to migration, oftentimes when it comes to poverty, it's easy to question why somebody wants to leave. I think as a society, we owe it to each other to give them a reason to stay. Yes. Being more mindful of our neighbors, just leaning in a little bit closer. If you're in a position to create jobs, create employment, because somebody you employ could be their hope, that gives them a reason to stay. If you're doing youth and community engagement, talk to the young people, use sports as a way to keep them protected from not only illegal migration, but drug use. But just be a brother's keeper, be a sister's keeper. And for Why Not Me, I think we're excited that part of its global initiative, Gambia, is included. So we're looking forward to the competition, obviously being a launch pad, but also seeing how to strengthen relationships between Clarence and likes of Nancy, to just kind of join our hands and hopefully make this world a better place, because we do need to ask if this is us, but there's always a hope that we are better than this, and it just starts with few people who just want to make a difference. So thank you guys for joining the show and this conversation, and to Clarence and Nancy, thank you guys again as well.